Hello and happy Monday evening, everybody. Thank you for attending. We've got a great crowd online today. It must be the topic, I suppose. So my name is Jackie, and I'm going to walk through this interview with Greg Winter regarding the discretionary bonus program. I want to say before I get Greg live, we did cover this topic to some degree about 10 months ago, but it was really more general conversation. And so today we wanted to review a little bit of that, but then focus on how the bonus fits into the overall compensation. So we are going to get Greg live and we're going to run through the questions. Hi, Greg.
Hello, Jackie. Hello, everyone.
Is that a buck that you shot?
No, that is actually Matt's second buck.
Oh.
When he was, I think, 15 years old, I believe.
Well, it's very
So it's
kind
getting
of
a little
him.
faded now.
It's kind of him to let you have it at your place.
It's kind of his mother to let him hang it there.
Well, that works too. So thank you for spending some time with us. We are talking today about how bonuses fit into the overall compensation for people that are employed by members of the IFMC. And even we did talk a little bit about the history of this 10 months ago when we talked about bonuses, but if you want to talk a little bit about the history, like how long have bonuses been here and what kind of inspired leadership to go that direction, we'll start with that.
Wow, you're stretching my memory here with when it started, Jackie. I think the first bonuses were handed out in the early 80s. So that's 4 decades ago.
Yeah,
And
because that's when I was born.
yeah, so that Deb and I were in our 20s. Ron would have been in his 30s, and my memory is not that good. But the I think the maybe the way to explain that is, you know, we had a typical startup company, and startups typically have negative cash flow in the early days, and we certainly had our share of that. And when you've got negative cash flow, there's tremendous pressure on keeping the costs down. And one of the largest costs in the type of business we were in, which was job shop fabricating, is labor. And so how do most startups manage that? Well, they offer pretty modest base pay so that they can keep or minimize the negative cash flow and more quickly get to positive cash flow. And so that really is what we did. And along the way, we recognized that we had some really key team members that were contributing considerably to the satisfaction of our customers. And of course, it's that customer satisfaction that causes them to send orders in and get us closer to the positive cash flow. So as soon as we could afford it, as soon as we had a consistent flow of positive cash flow, that's really when we started handing out bonuses. As far as the inspiration for it, you know, I talked about kind of the rational reasons with modest base pay and so forth. I can't really speak for Deb and Ron on this, but I can really link my inspiration back to training horses.
Okay.
So
You want to talk more about that, or are you just going to leave us with that?
I kind of figured you'd want me to.
Yes.
So uh, it turns out Deb and I were in 4-H when we were youngsters, and we both shared a Shetland pony. And as time went on, we each got our own horse. The horse that I got was a registered quarter horse that was a stud, and he was 3 years old, had never been ridden, but he had killed a calf. And so the owners of the horse just wanted to get rid of him. So they were willing to sell at a really low price, and that was all I could afford. So that's what I got. But now I wanted to learn how to train horses. And so I got and keep in mind now, I mean, this is before the internet, so you don't just do a Google search on this stuff. You have to go to the library. We're out in Hubbard Lake, so we're out in farm country. But ended up getting a set of manuals on how to train horses. And I studied those over, and my takeaway there was that the author of these manuals had spent a lot of words and a lot of chapters to basically keep repeating in a whole bunch of different ways that all you need to do is reward the behavior you like, discourage the behavior you don't like. And I applied that with my horse and won a lot of blue ribbons with that horse. And that really kind of cemented that belief, that set of habits in for me. And not only does that apply to horses and dogs and other animals, but that applies pretty well with people too. If you let them know what you want, you reward the stuff you like, you discourage the stuff you don't like, you get more of what you like. And so that really was kind of the lens that I was seeing business through. And so with customers, I was kind of looking at it as though if I want the customers to spend more money, I need to reward them with the things that they want. And of course, with the team members, if the team members are doing a really good job of satisfying the customers so that they're sending in more orders, then we ought to reward them. And so that really was the inspiration, if you will, for my part. And I've continued to apply that, and that's one of my key things I do to this day.
That's interesting. I never heard that horse story from you before. I think people are a little more complicated than horses. They bring other outside factors with them, but you're absolutely right that it's, boiled down. That's really what needs to happen. So that's good. And then real quickly also, I want to just cover, because again, we did cover this a little bit 10 months ago, but how is the bonus amount that's available kind of across the board? How is that number determined? Is there a formula? Is it conversation? Do you look at factors outside of just what's going on in the IFMC? Just how is that determined?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a kind of a complicated one, but let me start really zoomed out. It all starts with we need to have customers sending in orders. Those orders need to be for promises that team members have made, but also that our team members can keep at a lower cost than the price they were sold at. And so that's what causes positive cash flow. So you've got to have the positive cash flow before you've got the raw material for bonuses, so to speak. The exception to that is with startups or with new product development, where you've got to spend time and dollars developing the product before you ever sell it. And so there you need to have access to cash. So that might be borrowed or maybe equity cash, but you've got to have that access to cash. Once you've got that access to cash, now we need to set aside some for reserves for any risks. And I probably don't need to spend a lot of time talking about the risk. We just experienced a pandemic. I think cybersecurity risks are pretty well known. There's of course, well, the big three in economics, the big three risks are pandemics, wars, natural disasters. I don't need to talk a lot more about that. They talk about that in the news today. But we've also got warranty issues, the economic downturn, obsolescence of products, changes in government regulations. So you've got a number of things that you need to have enough cash to survive if those things happen. Once you take that out, now you can divide what's left equitably amongst the other stakeholders. Now, the question of what's equitable and how do you get there, that's a complicated process. And there's a number of different considerations there that can be made. So I already talked about for early stage companies, you've got to have the cash available. That isn't necessarily because the customer sent it in. So somebody's got to be taking the risk of saying, okay, we think that this is a good enough product, a good enough idea that it's going to turn into orders. So we're going to hand out some of the cash in bonuses, but we're betting that that's going to be there down the road. And so that's one of the complications with early stage product development. But you've got to be developing product because existing product becomes obsolete, and you can't wait until it's obsolete before you start development. So that tends to be I don't know how to do that without using a lot of discretion.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you look at our business model and the USB business model, the IFMC, that is an ecosystem that is really beneficial, but there's costs to it. And some of the cost is maybe another approach to it. One of the reasons that works is because some of the team members can see beyond their business units and can behave in ways that are helpful to the rest of the ecosystem. And so there are a number of those folks, and those folks are very valuable in harvesting the value, if you will, of that ecosystem. But again, that becomes a pretty discretionary choice, and that I can't make that choice on my own because I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what's happening in the other layers of the organization and in the other business units. And so that really needs to be passed down. That authority to make those discretionary decisions need to be passed down through layers of the chain of command. And we need to trust that those choices are being made equitably. And I know we put in a tremendous amount of thought into that process every year, and I'm pretty confident we do that equitably and well.
Yeah, and that's where businesses get into trouble, where they just end up with a percentage number and everybody kind of across the board gets the same thing. One person can't possibly decide what value 1,200 other people are contributing. So
Right.
that's how businesses end up in that. So what you were just talking about actually makes me think of an idea potentially for a future Equipped Live is all of those expenses that a business has other than payroll. There's so many other things that, that revenue has to got to generate to cover those other expenses. So that could be a potential future Equipped Live. But on this topic, when we say overall compensation, so that was the title of this, some people would argue that that should not be bonus and should be part of regular pay. So why, and again, we touched on this a little bit before, but why make it bonus? Why not, if the companies are doing well consistently, why not just make that part of everybody's pay?
Well, and that could be one of the choices, and it turns out we do have some variation between business units depending on what markets they're in. But let's start out here. You can look at compensation on a continuum, and it is perfectly okay for the compensation system to be 100% base pay, but it's also completely acceptable for that to be 100% commission-based or pay for performance. And so it's not a right or wrong issue. It's a matter of making a choice and then living with that choice. And not to say you can't make adjustments over time, but that's the continuum all the way from 100% pay for performance or piecework, if you will, or 100% base pay. We chose to go down the path we did for some of the risk calibration reasons that I talked about. So we had reserves for risks, but in a lot of cases, some of your best people are problem solvers, some of the better people yet are the problem avoiders. And the problem avoiders avoid those risks. And so you can convert some of those reserves into bonus if you avoid the risk. And so that, that's part of that risk piece. But the other piece that I think is really powerful and maybe not as well understood as I'd like it to be is the cultural piece of having that variation in pay and having the discretionary bonuses the way we do. If you, for anybody that's worked around or maybe seen companies that pay 100% commission and also have the opportunity to see companies that pay 100% base pay, there's a pretty different culture there. And the folks that tend to appreciate or tend to gravitate toward the commission tend to be maybe even arrogant, but very self-confident, and they're self-confident in their own ability to get results. And that self-confidence is really powerful when you're talking to a customer. Customers can sense that. And so I like that commission end or that pay for performance end of the scale, partly for that reason. And the folks that maybe lack confidence maybe would prefer a 100% base pay, and that's okay. But that customers can sense that as well and don't respond as well. So that's one of the issues. The other really big issue here is with the discretionary bonus, it requires trust. And I know we've mentioned this before, but one of the books I really like is Stephen Covey's The Speed of Trust. And he talks about how fast transactions can go when you've got parties that trust each other. And because of the choices we made, because of our location, we need speed as one of the, and quick transactions as one of our value propositions with the customers. And so having a high trust environment in the IFMC is really important to me. And that trust, the discretionary bonus program really almost self-selects folks that are more prone to be trusting and rejects people that just can't trust others. And so I think that makes it harder to hire people, but I think that really that's really beneficial. So that culture piece is a biggie as well.
Yeah, and I would suggest, instead of maybe saying arrogance, I would say, because that can come across as ego and a negative sort of connotation, but confidence is excellent. I like that description that you used, but I would say the bonus program to me lends itself well to people who are driven and personally responsible for their own outcomes. Those are the type of people that really like the bonus program. And if our leaders in the IFMC are doing it correctly, they're coaching those who maybe don't understand that, and they're helping them realize what they can do differently to maybe get a bigger bonus the next year. So I think the program's quite rewarding and works well, as long as everybody's utilizing it in that way. So we are over our time. Do you have any final thoughts you want to add to this conversation?
Well, just real quick, I always like to leave with actions that people could take. I would encourage everyone to try to facilitate customer satisfaction. And if you're not in a role where you can do that directly, support the people that are. And the more we can satisfy those customers, the more orders we're going to get. And the bigger the bonuses are going to be if we make and keep the right promises. And then on a personal level, if that's what you're striving for, and you're also continually striving to enlarge your hedgehog overlap, and we've talked about that in the past, but maybe somebody may need to look that up. But if you're enlarging your hedgehog overlap, I think those are good actions that you can take and just keep chipping away at it every day. And but if we look at history, we have a history of the customers rewarding us with pretty nice orders, and folks in our audience have a pretty good history of converting those orders into positive cash flow. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, Greg, thank you for your time once again. We will be on in another month. We'll get that date and information out to everybody in a couple of weeks on when we're going to see you again. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.